All right, so now it's time to take those links and the data page ID and create a function to pass that to go grab the page contents. So when we click on our link, we actually get some content. We actually update the content in the page. So we'll go ahead and we'll go back to Dreamweaver. And of course, the first thing we want to do is create a new function. So let's go ahead and let's do our comment first. The get page function is to make a call to the WordPress site to get the requested page content. And what we're going to name that function, as we can see, is the getPage function. So we're going to create a new function and we're going to call it getPage. And we'll just finish out our building our function here real quick. And to start, we know that we're going to have to pass a page ID into it. So we'll go ahead and we'll just set up our parameter to receive an argument. We'll call that object like we do anything else. And then the next thing we're going to do, just to make life easy, we're going to go up and grab our ajax call. We're going to copy it. Because we're going to do this, we're going to get the page data through, page content through an ajax call to the WordPress site. So we're going to just go ahead and paste that in there. We're going to, we'll remove that information. And the first thing we want to do is just make sure that our function is going to do what we want it to. So we'll do a console.log and we'll we're just going to put that's where we're going to return some data after we do our call. Next thing we need to do is we know that we went out to our API and we actually saw how we get our pages and we saw what our link is, our endpoint. All we need is to be able to update that ID and we'll get all the different pages. And so where we want to start here is we just want to go and we want to paste that link in here minus the ID, and then of course we just want to say it's going to be plus the object and then what we return from that object, what we get back from that object. And all we're going to pass in as the object is the actual ID. So we actually can just leave that as object and know that that's what we're going to get back in. And then we're going to get our data back. So we set up our function and we'll do more work with that, but we want to just take it step by step. And so the way that we are going to get that function to kick off, to give us information, is when that link is clicked, we need to capture it. And the way that we do that is as when we build the link, one of the things that we want to do is we want to go ahead and use an event listener. So at this point, we put the menu out. We get the data. It puts the menu out. And so what we can do here is we can actually leverage an event listener to capture all links instead of trying to specify specific links. And what we can do is say that we want it to be on a click event. So we'll say click, and also inside that click event, we can just capture and do the function right inside here. So let's go ahead and we'll leave that open. And what we want to capture is inside our menu, we know that we have list items, and we know that the list items have an anchor, a link placed in them. And what this does is this says anything inside the primary nav wrap that's a lil that has a anchor, an anchor tag inside of it, should come to us. We should watch it for a click event. And what we can do at this point is we can actually just go ahead and do a console.log. And what we want to capture in that console.log is we're going to use this. This meaning whatever clicks, as we discussed in class and as you'll be reading, whatever this is, whatever is clicked and comes into the function itself. And then what we can say is that we want, when you get clicked, what we want you to do is we want you to go ahead and grab the data, one of the data attributes. So in jQuery, we can use data. And what data says is, hey, look for any attribute that's starting with data dash, and then we can tell it pgid. So before we even call the function, we'll go ahead and we'll just test that out real quick and make sure that we're getting the attribute that we want. So we'll go to console, we'll open it up. We can open it up pretty big now because we're just going to work on this menu for right now. We'll do an empty cache and refresh. These are just a bunch of callbacks. We have an error. Let's see where that error is. And oh, we're missing a semicolon at the end. So let's go fix that before we even try to do anything else. We'll fix that, and that should take care of that. And we'll come out and give this one more shot. Empty cache, clear, empty cache. And we're missing another one yet. Primary nav, page ID. This, oh, silly me. Let's get rid of that. And there we go. Silly mistakes will get you every time. We'll do a refresh, empty cache, waiting for it to load. It loads. Hopefully when we click, we'll get a number. And we did. 29, 39. And that's exactly what we're looking for, because that's the object ID that we're sticking inside of that function. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to pass it into the getPage function and make sure that we're actually getting that as well. And the way that we can do that is we can actually just take our console log and we can update that to getPage. And so when we do that, the getPage, it should call it, it should pass that ID that we saw, and it should pass it into the getPage function. And then the getPage function should do an ajax call and actually go out and get that page and return all the data. So if we're lucky, that'll happen. Let's clear the console. And let's go ahead and empty cache, reload. Let's try challenges. And there we go. All of our page data came back. And we'll give it one more try. Love. We can see our page information for love came back. There's our page title. And here's our content that we want to put into the page itself. So we're off to a good start. So now that we know we have this data, the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and start doing more work on our page function. And so what we want to do is, like everything else, we want to go ahead and we want to start building a variable. And the way that we'll build that variable is we'll come in here and we'll declare a variable and we'll just call it pgbuild. And we'll define it as empty, as an empty variable. Now that that's in there as an empty variable, we can use that to actually build our information that we want to build inside of the page. The way that we will do that is we know in our index page, we're going to go back to our index page and we're going to look. We know that everything we build inside of this index page, all the content, we want to go inside this content element. We want it to tuck it away into that content element, and then it'll all display in there. So the way that we do this is we go inside here in our page function, and we say we'll use jQuery, and we'll say we'll use a selector, a CSS selector, and we'll use the ID of content. And we'll just say .html. And what this does is it replaces all the HTML with whatever we put inside here that's inside of that div. And if we take data and we put data in there and we save it, we can go ahead and see what happens. See if we're successful. So we're building our page. We hit challenges, and we see that something happened. And what's wrong, why it's not displaying correctly, is because actually what we told it to put in there was JSON, and JSON does not display itself too friendly inside the HTML page itself. The only way that we might be able to do that is by putting some pre-tags in or something of that nature. But what we can do is we can go over here to our network, and we can look at what we've called in, and let's just go look at a sample page. And what we want to look at on this sample page is we want to go ahead and we want to get the actual content, and let's just start with the title first. Down here is our title, and if we expand it, we see it's title rendered, and then there's our title. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to tell it that we want our data.title.rendered. And again, we'll come out, shrink this up a little bit, empty our cache, menu is built, challenges, and there we see challenges has come into play. Excellent. So we're off to a pretty good start. The only issue we have at this point is that we want challenges to be inside. We break our page up into sections so that we can manage it better. And if we go out and we take a look at our page source, we know that we have section and then div container. And so what we want to do is we want to come out here, go to our JavaScript again, and what we can do is right inside here we can say, we'll close this up, section class div container, and then of course we want to close those elements, and so we'll put in div, close div, and then close section. Should look a little better at this point. So we'll go ahead and we'll refresh, wait for our menu, hit who, and there we go. Of course, who comes up nicely now. Now that's our page title. The next thing we want to go after is our page content. So we saw our title with render, And then we see down here is our actual content. And we want our content to come in right under our title. And so what we'll do is we'll go back out here. And for now, we're just going to put it right next to each other. And we'll take care of it later. And we want our content. Right? Data, content, rendered. If we go out and we look, content, rendered. We know our data is coming right in there. And so if I hit save, and I come out, and I refresh, I empty the cache, hit challenges, and bam, there is my page content. So now we know we're pulling in our page title, our content, our link is working well. Each time we click on something, we get information from the next page. Pretty interesting information, by the way. And for the sake of time in the video, instead of typing everything out, what I would like to do at this point is go ahead and look in the changelog. And I'm going to go ahead and just take this whole page builder thing, and then I'll review it with you. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste this in there. And we're going to replace the content.html for right now, because we're going to actually just do that with the page builder variable. And I just pasted in from the changelog. And what you can see is what I've done is I've created a section, and inside that section, the first section, I've created content rendered. Then I created another section, which is in blue, which we're familiar with, and put a container in there as well. And then I've created a list. And the reason that I've created this list is to explore the different information that we can pull out of the JSON feed that we get back. So we can take a look at it and see what's there, what's available. And this is not even all of it. It's just a couple highlights, a couple pieces. And then I went ahead and I made another section. And in this section, because we're going to start trying to do some interesting things, well, first of all, I put the title at the end of the page just so we can have a look at it. And we know what it is. And then also, just for a little fun, I put a div at the very end, not even in a section, because we're going to use CSS to position that, if you can recall from what we were looking at, where we're headed. Let me go ahead and go out there and look at that. I think I have it here. When we click on it, that's exactly what this div is, title div. And we'll go ahead and we'll style it so that that div always is down there and you can see what's going on and it's fixed. Just makes for a cool page, I think. It's nice, always lets the person know where they're at, what they're doing. But that additional information that we were talking about is down here in blue. And it really is just there for you to learn and see what you can do, and there's our title as well. And so we're doing all of that with the exception of CSS, including this. And so when we go look at what we're doing right now, we can see we got our content, we have our title. Oops. Hang on. Let's see if I even saved it. I didn't save it. That's the problem. So if we come out and we take a look at it again, take a look at it, click. Now, when we do click, something is happening. Unfortunately, sometimes because we're calling another web server, and we're dealing with calling another web server with using our own content, our own web server, it can really present some challenges. And let's make sure we're calling another web server. Looks like we might have something going on here. It's empty cache. We saved that page. Okay, we know we did that call for our menus, and that worked. We did the U call. Oh, silliness. What we're missing is, if you recall, we stopped putting the content in, and what we need to do is place the content inside of the container so that it can populate it and that it comes up. And so we'll go back and we'll go ahead and we'll say, again, we'll say, we'll use jQuery, we'll use the CSS selector of ID, and we'll go for the content. We'll say .html, because that's what we want. We're actually replacing any HTML that's inside of there by doing this. Take our page builder, which is building all this HTML inside of it right there. We'll put it there and we'll say, now we should be in business. So if I pull this down and I hit who, we see that it updates the page with the who information, with that data. We see that little title div sitting down there that we created that we're going to take care of with CSS. Once we do our final cleanup, we want to make sure everything's working first. We'll go to you. Everything's looking great. Love, who, I. We're getting all of our information. We're getting everything that we wanted. All of our functionalities working great. And actually at this point, what we're ready to do is we're ready to go make things more user-friendly, look a little cooler, and be a little more user-friendly. Excellent. So now that we have our functionality working and everything doing what we want it to do, what we need to do is take care of one last problem. And that problem is especially with web applications, because there's things going on in the background. People click and they don't realize that something's happening, become frustrated. Right now we're kind of lucky at how quick and responsive our application is in this demonstration, but it's because we're on localhost to begin with, and obviously my web server is responding quite nicely today. But what we want to do is we want to let people know that something is going on. And the way that we do that is by just adding some interactivity to our site so that they can see that something is happening. And so the way we're going to do that, and I welcome you to copy and paste from our change log in these steps to expedite this process. But the first thing that we're going to do, that we want to do, is we want to go ahead and we want to put a div inside of our index. And we want to put it at the very bottom of the page. So we'll go to source index and we'll come down and we want to put it right after our app.js, right at the end of the body, because what we're going to do with this div is make it take over the entire page so that they can't click and keep trying to make things happen, and also to display some interactivity as well. So this will overlay everything, and it'll also have some style to it as well. For the styling of that div, we're going to go ahead and come down here, and we name that div the loaderdiv. And we're going to start making some CSS changes. First change I would like to make is I just want to update some fonts and make some changes in the way that our page looks font-wise. And so the way we're going to do that, we're going to start working on our CSS. Let's go ahead and save that div, and let's go ahead and put these first changes of our CSS in the top, and what we're doing is we're actually importing some Google fonts. And we'll save that, and we'll make more changes at a later time to really address these fonts. But for now, we're just going to let them take over, and we can see they took over in some places. And we'll make adjustments as we continue to build our app. We'll make adjustments to those fonts. You can see that the loader div is sitting down. Well, you can't even see it, to be honest with you. And so we see those font changes take place. Again, these are all just aesthetic, completion, roundup things, more to demonstrate, like worry about functionality before you worry about how the site looks. Our next thing that we want to do is we added that title div to the bottom of the page with the title in it, and we want to go ahead and make that sit on the bottom right corner, which we're going to do that through our positioning fixed bottom right. We put the font size, and we use the HSLA so we can set the opacity as well. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to inject a picture into that loader div, and again we want that div to overlay everything, so we're setting it on a Z index of 99, and just some aesthetic value things that we're putting in, such as opacity. And again, the reason that this is important is we don't want them to be able to keep clicking on things, because all that it'll do, and we're going to put this at the end of our document, of our CSS document. When users keep clicking, and we're borrowing an image from somewhere else, which is fine, pulling it from somewhere else. When users keep clicking, and you can see now, even though the menu is built, because we have that div overlay, there's no way that we can click on anything. We can scroll, but we can't click because that div is on the top layer and it's blocking us from clicking anything else, which is a good thing. We're going to interactively make this div appear and disappear, but for now, it's just going to lay there until we add that interactivity to it. So how do we go ahead and add that interactivity to make that overlay appear and disappear? Well, the biggest thing that we do is we go after our loader, and what we want to do is, on success of the page build, of the nav build, we want it to fade out, of course. So, and we want that because the first time that we go through and load the app, what's going to happen is it's going to sit there as we've seen. So we're going to now go work on our app.js. And again, we want that to load as soon as everything is done building, right? So as soon as everything is our first rev through, we do that initial build of the menu. It's the only time that we call this function, and we want to make sure is that that loader does not stay there. And we're going to use some jQuery transitions, animation effects, to make it go out. And we're going to tell it to go slow, and we're telling it, hey, the loader div, fade that out, and we're telling it to do it after all this is completed. So we'll go ahead and we'll save, and we'll empty cache. And now you see it faded away when the menu was built. The next thing that we want to do while we're up in here is when we build the menu, we want to do a couple, we basically want to add some animation to it. And we want to make sure that, first of all, that we hide it. And what a hide does in jQuery is it does a display none. And the reason that that's good is because we want that slide down effect to happen, and we have to make sure that it's hidden before we can display it. The next thing that we want to do is, once the menu is built, we could do this before or after adding the click event listeners. In here, we'll just stay consistent with what we do. So we say menu builder, get the data items, gets the menu, populate, which is now you can't see this div, the primary nav wrap, because we've hidden it, and we populate it with the menu. And once we populate it with the menu, we want it to slide down. We want it to just have that cool effect. And so now, if we go ahead and we empty cache and we clear, watch the menu, and you see how it slides down as the gears fade away, which is great. Now we have one other problem. We can end up with issues when we're going from page to page, which, by the way, we can also see the our title div taking effect down there with the CSS that we put onto it. And now we have one other problem, which is if we get someone who's click happy, they may just keep clicking away, and we're lucky because we're local and we're also caching as well. We'll get into that in another lesson. But we have caching happening as well in our browser, meaning it keeps a copy of that ajax. So we need to add some interactivity to our getPages function. The way that we do that is, first of all, when the function gets called, we want it to fade in. We want it to cover everything up so that the user cannot keep clicking on things. And the way we do that is by doing a loaderdiv, right? We call the ID, and we say fade in slow. So now if I do a refresh, fades out, I click on it, and it faded in. The problem with it, and you can see that's what we want, is to not be able to click on things, but our page is loaded now and we want to be able to click on things. And the way that we address that is we can do it in several ways. The way that we're going to do it is we want to swap the information. We want to swap the page information with the new information from the information that's there. I'll explain this as we get it over here. And we want this right after the page build. We're going to replace the HTML content with this bit of code. And I think we missed, make sure you don't miss that. If you're copying and pasting, make sure you don't miss the closing function. We'll do it's always cleaner to just highlight the whole thing and get it done. So at this point, what happens is it hits here. We got success, which means we've got the information now. So we're not waiting on anything, and we can start to move forward. We come in, we do the page build. We populate the page build, the pgbuild variable. We come down here and we say, hey, whatever is in that content div right now, fade it out. And once you fade it out, let's scroll the body or the HTML. It depends on which browser we're in, but let's scroll it to the top so that we don't end up stuck on the bottom of the page. I would welcome you to comment these out and see what happens when we don't do that. I don't want to take too much time in the video. And then what we want to do is, because we're inside the content build, we're able to just say this, because this is what we're focused on. This, replace the HTML with the page build fade in, and then slowly fade out the loaderdiv. So we'll go ahead and we'll save that and we'll refresh. Fades out. Get our page. Fades in, fades out. Who? Fades in, fades out. Excellent. That's really good interactivity. Lets the user know when something's going on, prevents them from making it worse by continuously clicking on new things, and really does a great job at giving some application feel. With that, we have all of our functionality put in that we wanted to do. We'll do a quick wrap up here. And so what we've done is we've basically added the loaderdiv element to the index.php, and we removed all but 3 paragraphs elements in our H section. We'll worry about our home page last. Once we have all of our content, then we know how we want to build our home page, and we'll actually pull bits and pieces from other pages to do that. We updated our styles to add a little Disney magic to our page, and we've changed our ajax call inside our init function to actually go out to WordPress instead of a local file and grab API feeds so that we could actually create our menu based on our WordPress site. We pass that information into our menu builder, which we just made some updates to make sure that we were grabbing the new information available from the WordPress API. And then we created our getPage function. Additionally, we went into our WordPress site and we updated some plugins, but that was not the primary focus. The beginning of this was more to help those who currently might be behind or have lost our WordPress page. We discussed a lot about API and API endpoints. All of this is also included in your lesson. There is knowledge checks and information available for many of the things to extrapolate on them in the lesson itself. Great. So until next time, this was step 103.